Hello and welcome to our Reboot review. I'm Paul,
And I'm Dave.
and this week we're discussing the episode of Reboot titled Icons. This episode originally aired September 17th, 1997 here in Canada. Alrighty, so let us start off with the number one song in America this week, Dave.
Hmm, This one around that time. Uh, Again, just sort of thinking, especially with what was on last week or last time it was uh, shown with that. Would it still have stuck around or would something new have come up?
It is still Honey by Mariah Carey.
Yeah, yeah.
Alrighty, moving on to the number one film in America. Any ideas?
Again, with that around in 97.
September 97.
Hmm. Again, with a couple of big ones that have happened over the last couple of years, and it's given a bit of a time frame, but it's still kind of a case of I was probably too young to either pay attention to what was popular within their sort of ranking scale or what's kind of been going on. The
I.
only the only one
This.
thing that's coming to mind is one of those dating films. Yeah, like even their titles are meshed up in my mind. Nothing that comes to mind.
Yeah, I would be shocked if you've ever heard of this movie. It's a movie called In and Out, and not the burger chain.
Well, that's surprising, though. It is a case that I only really discovered that that was a thing a good couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's a movie that how to explain. So basically, it's based off of. So Tom Hanks won an Oscar for Philadelphia,
Right.
in which he mentioned um, two guys in his high school. One was a coach and one was a classmate who were gay, and they ended up making this movie somehow based off of that. I don't know.
Like, I suppose in certain respects, it's kind of like interesting enough, but also kind of case of, oh man, this probably caused some issues, maybe.
Um, I don't see any like it got decent reviews. It was a 73
Hmm.
percent on Rotten Tomatoes, which is not bad.
Hmm.
It didn't do amazing at the box office, but it probably didn't lose money. So I don't know. All right, let's move on to the important things.
Video game things?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, what things?
There's not really a ton again this week, kind of sadly. If you had a Saturn, you could pick up the Street Fighter collection.
Always really nice, though it is kind of a case of there's probably like only three to four-ish.
Um, so it's basically just a collection. So it comes with Street Fighter 2, the new challengers, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Street Fighter Alpha 2. It's basically just a collection of Street Fighter 2 variants.
Okay, because on the one hand, that makes complete and perfect sense, and it needs to be saved and preserved for what it is. But also, at its specific time, it was also kind of a case of, why so many tunes? Why so many? But then, of course, it's a case of, honey, it's a fighting game, and it's Street Fighter 2, and that's a good enough reason.
Okay, so if that wasn't your jam, the very next day, if you had a PlayStation 1, you could go pick up this little game called Oddworld Abe's Odyssey,
Oh,
which
very
I've
much
never
neat.
played.
Very much neat, despite the fact that I only have very scant memory of it, and sadly never played it.
It does look. It's one of those games, like one of those franchises where I've always been like, I should play that because it looks really good.
And it's kind of the case of I remember seeing those things at my age, and it's kind of like, wow, this is terrifying and gross. And in certain cases, I can accept that because they do that at my particular age group. But this is starting to edge on the line of, "Ew, I don't really like this." But then seeing it more nowadays, it's like, oh, right, it's that series. It's on my backlog somewhere. So we're looking down the ridiculously long list.
Yeah, I might have to give it a go. Might have to give it a
We
go.
wish you the best of luck.
Alright, let's get into the episode. So, at the end of last episode, Enzo and Andrea were in a
And
game.
Frisket. Don't forget
Oh,
Frisket.
yes, and Frisket. We're in a game that was totally not Mortal Kombat,
No, not at all.
and they ended up losing.
Yeah.
And the characters, everybody in mainframe assumes that they're dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
This episode picks up after that, but we don't know how long after that.
Yeah.
So Enzo, who is now going by Matrix,
Yeah.
um, and he's totally in his edgy teenager phase. Uh,
Oh, most assuredly. Like, out of all the things, I pretty much think he has all the bases covered. I'm not sure if there's one or two things that could have been missing, but it might have just thrown the entire image off.
and he hasn't been doing steroids at all.
Oh, of course not. Being trapped in kind of inside of games that involve life or death situations and having to be in your best physical condition. Oh, there's no chance of that.
So him and Andrea are hopping between systems in an attempt to return to mainframe.
Yes.
They're obviously now grown up and more experienced. They find themselves in a system that is slowly crashing, and they train a group of sprites to defend themselves for when another GameCube attack
Yeah.
arrives. Sorry. Um, Couple of things I still don't understand about how this works.
In the typical sense, or like just story wise, how they decide to go with it.
Kind of both. How do
Mm.
games go from system to system? Because like that's not how anything works.
Yeah. Yeah. Like at the very most, you could take it within video game console sort of logic of game passing from person to person, sharing the game in that sort of sense, going the more high technical sort of way of everything being online, just go onto the computer, select the game, and there you go.
I guess. I mean, that's not a terrible. That's not a bad explanation, but it is also 1997,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
downloadable games aren't really a thing.
yeah. Just a faint dream in someone's eye before it causes all the death and destruction that's here now.
Because like that didn't really become a thing until Steam, and Steam is when is Half Life 2? I want to say that's like 2000 something, 2004,
Yeah, around then.
which is basically what helps launch Steam. So
Hmm.
we're a ways away from that becoming like a thing. But anyway, let's move past that because it's more of a nitpick than anything.
Hmm.
So we see the opening where there are some characters who are totally not modeled off of the aliens from Mars Attacks.
No, no, of course not. What were the thoughts of just people inside of glass jars with giant brains going, eh, 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 eh.
I don't think I've ever seen Mars Attacks.
You probably would have liked it for its campiness. There may be the one or two things that you're like, oh dear God, why? But on whole, it's a fun enough ride.
I might have to give it a watch one of these days. Anyway, um, so that game kind of ends, and then they get transported to this new system,
Yes.
and yeah, I kind of
Mainframe was bad, but this is kind of oof.
yeah, this system's like it's really shitty, and it's about
Mm,
to like be destroyed, and they're like, well, we're gonna teach you how to, defend yourselves when another game arrives.
yes.
Um, and then there's a Magnificent Seven reference, and I don't know. This episode was fine, but I was kind of like, I was a little confused because I'm like, how long between the last episode and this one has there been? Like, are we supposed to think there's been 10 years or something? Because Enzo's now all of a sudden, like, a moody teenager.
It's a thought, but it's also kind of a case of going into this new story idea. There's stuff within the story, uh, boarding and whatnot that they probably do, where they probably have a reference for the time frame, but definitely within the show, it's kind of left up to interpretation until it's really explained.
So they are going to explain how all this shit works.
At some point, whether or not it's going to be enough to satisfy you, most definitely is going to be the question.
Okay. But there is like there's at least an explanation. Okay. I can
Hmm.
I can handle that. Even if the explanation isn't good, at least they try.
Hmm.
So yeah, what did you think of this episode, Dave?
It was always fun, kind of diving back into the split, as I like to call it, between the reboot series, where it starts at the beginning with uh, all the characters being introduced, Bob and whatnot, Enzo having all the experiences that he has there, and then just with everything that kind of happens and how it kind of colors his experience heading into this, it's just like, oh, just wonderful nostalgia for all of our edgy, uh, dark stages through our lives when it comes to it.
Yeah,
And I,
go ahead.
and I
Sorry.
think on whole, it's just interesting with seeing couple thoughts and other sorts of things that they did within the show, showing his new personality as it is, and especially with how Andrea kind of works with the whole system of it now, uh, seeing their dynamic with how everything sort of works.
Yeah.
It's always interesting to see this start, and then of course seeing how the rest of the series sort of goes, how it develops, works from there. It's just so much fun.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this episode like I understand the point of it, which is to like bring us into this new like paradigm, but I feel
Mhm.
like not much really happens in it.
Yeah, that's true. Again, having to work a bit with a story of going to different systems and the stories that can be built with that. I suppose there's only so much that you can kind of do, but in some cases, it might either start diving into particular cliches or kind of retreading old ground in certain situations.
Yeah, I don't know. I just was like, okay, can we kind of get to like the point here, and then the episode ended.
Hmm.
It's not like it's a bad episode. It's just I was kind of like, okay, like can we get going here, and then it kind of just didn't.
Hmm.
But it is an interesting like new paradigm that they've set up at least. So I'm like, okay, I didn't love this episode, but at least it's an interesting concept that you're kind of refreshing the show with.
Okay. And I suppose it will just be a question of what the writers will kind of go with going on with newer episodes to see how things kind of pan out.
Yeah, yeah.
So I suppose the big question is, I suppose I'll ask about the first one. What do you think of Andrea's character now with her new look as well as her experiences and how she interacted with other characters?
I mean, I don't feel like her character changed all that much. It's just a like an older version of the same. Like I don't see like a massive character change in her.
Mm.
But I thought like the design is cool. A lot of the designs in this are cool.
Oh yeah.
We see that like one gargoyle looking thing that had a cool design.
Oh yes, with what they were fighting.
Enzo being a edgy teenager, like the design is good.
Okay. Because that's my other question of what do you think of Matrix?
Okay, so okay, it is not a surprise to anyone that I am not a fan of Enzo for the most part.
Yeah, with the couple of episodes we've run through, you started to appreciate some of the things. He started to build up, get a little bit more of a character in the last couple episodes, and then this kind of happens.
Yeah, it's hard to say because I'm like the initial introduction. I'm like, okay, it's a good design. It's an interesting idea, but I'm not entirely sold on it yet.
Okay. So pretty much the case of sticking the new character in front of you, getting the confirmation that, oh man, this is Endro, but he confirms, call me Matrix. Just sort of the case of he keeps those couple bits and aspects, but this he essentially trying to make himself as a new person with a new situation that he's in.
Yeah, very much so. And like, at least okay. There is one thing that they did in this episode that I was a little surprised by.
Yeah.
So when they first introduce Matrix, he pins down this one virus with his boot and then like shoots it in the head.
Yes.
And I was quite surprised that they got away with that level of violence on a kids show.
Okay. I suppose on the one hand, with the consideration of viruses, the series starts to introduce different sorts of types. And with this particular one, it just looks like giant praying mantis with bug and whatnot. So in case of, in comparison to what we've kind of experienced with megabyte and hexadecimal, this is new, but eh, lower range in certain sort of cases. But yeah, especially the case that they censored it but still showed the sound of the gun going off and showed the thing writhing in blue flame before completely evaporating. It could have been some things, but I think on whole they kind of picked the couple particular things that sort of allowed it to sort of slip by enough so that it didn't have to be uh, too much of an issue with the censors.
Yeah, no, like they do kind of like a little bit of censoring on it, but I'm still surprised at like, oh wow, you were able to show that on a kids show, okay? Because they do
Mm,
straight up just like execute this virus.
yeah, because the whole thing virus bad, also a case of praying for mercy, and then start getting to other questions. But should that be so much of a concern within a kids show with how much they've kind of gone? Question might come up again, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay. I feel like you probably know this, but I'm not someone who complains about like, oh, this was super violent or whatever. But like, I was a little bit like, considering the time,
Yeah, true.
I was kind of surprised that because what network aired this? This was YTV.
YTV, I believe, around that time. Not
Yeah,
sure how many other ones picked it up.
yeah, it's YTV and Toonami are airing in this. So I was kind of
Mm,
like Cartoon Network Toonami. Um, I was a little surprised that they were going to be cool with that, but I mean, I'm fine with it. I'm not one of these people who are like, oh no, you can't show children violence. That's terrible. Like, oh, well,
mm.
whatever.
It might also be a case of particular time frame. Like in the past, I know that Reboot was usually either afternoon kids sort of show, but after a certain point, it was like, yeah, this is more of an evening show. The kids are maybe in bed and probably only teens or whatnot is probably watching this.
Maybe, but it's I don't know. It's this weird thing of like, it's sort of a kids show, but sort of not. It kind of feels like they're not entirely sure who they want their audience to be.
Okay. Case that they want to supposedly grow up with their uh, viewer base with how long the show's kind of been going on, but either the case of either going too fast or trying to stretch out a little bit too much to try and gain additional viewing and whatnot, and possibly straying a little bit too much.
Well, it feels like partway through season 2 they just decided that like, well, this isn't really a kids show anymore. Now we're making it for teens. And it's
Hmm.
kind of like, okay, but you were a kids show like 6 months ago, so this feels weird. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, I thought the episode was fine. You have
No,
anything
on
else?
whole, no, I think with this, it was definitely interesting enough, especially with, despite the fact that, oh boy, Matrix has kind of a hair trigger with most of that sort of stuff. He and Andrea and Frisket still have the thought of, if they're jumping from system to system, they're going to at least try and do some good in most cases, everything that's kind of been going on. Because it's what they kind of done in most cases, and just not their majority goal, but while they're there, they might as well do some good.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So I forgot to mention at the beginning, this episode was written by Christy Marks, who is a
Uh,
name that you probably don't know, but she has written for like every TV show you've ever heard of for kids.
yeah, that wouldn't be too surprising with a little bit of research that I've looked into with this.
Like, so she started as a writer for the new Fantastic Four in '78, and she wrote for like a bunch of Spider-Man stuff and GI Joe and Gem and TMNT and The Twilight Zone and Babylon 5 and Reboot, obviously, and Beast Wars, and like
Uh,
she did like an X-Men show and a Kong animated series.
Animated one or one of the other ones that were on there
Which one?
for the X-Men show.
Oh no, it was it. I don't think they've ever done. They did do a live action X-Men show, but they didn't call it X-Men. Um,
But not that one.
no, it's an animated one. And more recently, something that I didn't even know existed. Did you know there was a revival of Biker Mice from Mars in 2006?
Oh my dear God, what?
I just discovered this because she was a writer on the show, but in 2006 they revived Biker Mice from Mars.
Oh my gosh.
It was
Why
on.
did I not supposedly hear of this?
It was on 4 Kids, I guess.
Yeah, that might have been a thing, but additionally, why did I not hear of this?
I have no idea. I just heard about it now, but yeah,
Yeah.
I
Rather intriguing. Thing to look into.
oh, Biker Mice from Mars was terrible. Anyway,
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Case of had some of the toys when I was a kid, but can hardly remember the show. Possibly for good reason, but possibly for another reason. Who really knows? I'm not too sure.
I tried rewatching the show like 5 years ago or so, and I couldn't make it through the pilot episode.
Ooh.
It was bad. Anyway,
Duly noted, despite the fact that I'm probably going to go into that same wall.
next week we'll be discussing the episode where no sprite has gone before.
Ah, yes.
Until then, I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.